Hey everybody, welcome to day 10 of Inktober. Today we are on Coma Berenices on my Galaxy Girl prompt list, which literally means Bernice's hair. And I guess Bernice or Berenices, I don't know. I should have done a pronunciation check, but I did not. Basically, she was a queen of Egypt, and she promised Aphrodite that she would cut off her hair if her husband returned safe from battle. And he did return safe from battle, so she cut off her hair, and the goddess honored her by turning her hair into a constellation. So that's the really short explanation of that lore. I didn't draw golden locks, but I did imagine a woman with long, flowing star galaxy hair. So this was a bit of an easier piece for me. I needed something that was a bit of a break, and so I just went crazy with the watercolor and the salt and drawing ink strands of hair. I don't know what you would call this position that the woman's in. I guess like 3/4 behind, I don't know. But I actually really like drawing this facial position where you just kind of see the eyelash in the side of the face. It's very appeasing to me. So when I do this kind of galaxy-like hair, I, as you can see, lay down the watercolor or colored ink if you have it. It's whichever you have. I just don't have a lot of colored ink. But I lay down the color first, and then I throw some salt in there for some texture and kind of distant stars. And then I go in, after it's completely dry, I put some plain water over the colored part, and I carefully push in more black ink around the color. The reason I don't mix the color with the black is because it would get muddy if I did that and mix too much with the black ink and kind of create this, I don't know, weird brown. So when it's already dried and I put the water over top and then place the black on top of that, the way the black ink spreads, it looks more like the night kind of creeping into the color instead of mixing with the color. It's kind of hard to explain, but for whatever reason, it seems to work a lot better for me. I also put a little bit of salt into the black afterwards, but the salt doesn't seem to create as big of an impact when the ink is super dark and concentrated. I think it's just harder for the effect to happen because it's just so thick, whereas a ink wash or a colored wash doesn't have a lot of pigment, so it easily pushes that pigment away from the salt. But it still does do a little something, so I still include it so I get a variation of texture. I went over brushes in my supply video, but I keep meaning to say that I actually really enjoy this little round Zen brush that I got from Jet Pens. I have been using that almost exclusively for my inking liners, and I mean, this is like I almost want to say like a $2 to $5 brush. It's not expensive at all. I'm really impressed with the Zen brushes. I kind of mentioned before that I haven't been using my brush pen very much because I can't put the super dark deleter number 4 ink in there or else it will gum up my brush pen. So that's why I've been using more of just dipping my brush into the ink for lines. It's definitely a different feel than using a brush pen. There's not as much control. Well, I guess I don't want to say there's not as much control. There is control, it's just a different type of control. So I kind of have to be a little more careful with the regular brush instead of the brush pen. That might just be the brushes I have. I don't think I have as fine of tipped brushes as I do my brush pen. So I might want to invest in some smaller inking brushes for the fine details. I did want to incorporate the fact that Bernice, whatever her name is, did cut her hair. So there is a slight cut that I put in her long hair in the background here. I didn't want it to be too noticeable, but I wanted to include it in some way. So that's why there's a separation in her hair here. I'd love to do a hair tutorial in the future, But kind of my basic tips for hair is if you start with strands coming from the scalp and then leading off into the main body of the hair, it'll typically look good. You don't want to have many lines just starting in the middle of the hair and then going in different directions. You want to think of drawing hair like you would brush it. So you kind of start at the top and brush out. Especially you want to start where there's going to be a darker, thicker part of the hair and then make those brush marks out into where it's going to be looser. Think of it as brushing your hair. That's the best way I can explain it. To make hair more realistic, I also add little wispy parts. I add them a little bit later, but I've added a bit around the top of her head and where her hair meets her forehead. So that's usually where you have little baby hairs, and I like to draw those a lot. Gives a little bit more of realism, I want to say. Since there's so much going on in this piece, so much hair, I didn't want to make everything black, so I did some of the light texture in the background. I may have gone overboard with texture again in this one, but I don't even care at this point. I just want to do texture all day long. It's also hard to judge whether or not the salt is going to go crazy with texture. Like by her face, the salt decided to go nuts, and every single piece of salt worked and spread out the paint, whereas I put it somewhere else down below and it just didn't spread out very much. So you kind of never know what's gonna happen. So since today is Friday, I had to bring my piece to school and finish it after teaching. Again, I teach at Laguna College of Art and Design, an entrepreneurship class for the artist. I'd love to start offering something like that online when I get a Patreon started. I was thinking of starting a Patreon after this whole Kickstarter and doing simple tiers, but also maybe having a couple education tiers, whether it be for artwork or for things like social media and marketing, which is what I teach at LCAD. Let me know if you guys would be interested in that or what other Patreon tiers you would like to see. I've been dying to start a Patreon for a long time. I just wanted to make sure that I was ready to commit myself fully to Patreon. Since it is a monthly subscription, I wanted to make sure that I was prepared to provide monthly rewards that you guys would really, really like. And I think I'm really getting close to that point. Especially now that I'm making YouTube videos, it would be very beneficial for me to have a Patreon and offer extra rewards for those of you who enjoy my videos and want to help me keep creating them. I also really want to look into getting some sort of studio space. I don't have a studio right now, and I've lived in California my whole life, which is great, but everything here is super expensive. And there's not a whole lot of studio spaces. I've applied to one before and they haven't really returned my application, and it's been like 8 months. So I think I'm just going to have to start investing on some sort of typical office space or just a separate, I don't even know, apartment? Anyway, when I start a Patreon and even this Kickstarter, that will help achieve that goal. So here I'm just putting little tiny chrome silver embellishments on her ears, little earrings, and then a little crown on her head. It looks more Greek, but honestly, if this woman had long flowing golden hair in Egyptian times, I'm assuming she wasn't purely Egyptian. I don't know. Enlighten me. I have no idea. Were there blonde Egyptians? Maybe there were. My family is Spanish and I'm blonde, so maybe there are blonde Egyptians. It was really nice to let loose with this piece and not have to focus too much on anatomy and stuff like that. Just really let the ink and the paint do its thing. I hope you all enjoyed it. I also hope you all are enjoying your Inktober. Please, please, please be sure to check out the Lyfe Ink 18 tag on Instagram. There are so many wonderful artists following along with my Galaxy Girl prompt list, and I wish I could post them all, but you can definitely check out that tag. All right, next up is number 11, Leo. Thank you all for stopping by. I hope you subscribe to follow along with this series, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.